Welcome to Legends of Data and AI. Each episode includes inspiring and actionable data and artificial intelligence insights from global leaders across industries. Your host, Dr. Usama Fayyad, was the first Chief Data Officer at Yahoo and is Chairman of Open Insights and Executive Director of the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Legends of Data and AI, our podcast where we kind of tap into some of the folks who understand AI at a deeper level and who will help us understand kind of what is real versus what is not, and how AI plays a increasingly big role in all our lives and our businesses. It's my pleasure to introduce my guest today, Evangelos Simoudis, someone I've known for a long time. In fact, at the very last decade of the last century, Evangelos and I were doing a lot of tutorials at conferences like KDD and AAAI and IJCAI, kind of talking about machine learning, talking about the new world of data mining and data science. Evangelos himself is, I consider him one of the pioneers in this area. He's been working for over 30 years in Silicon Valley, and his journey included, working at large corporations, including IBM, where he helped to launch the new products in data mining at IBM. Then he did a couple of startups and exited successfully from both of them in the early 2000s. He then moved on with his career to be in venture capital, working with a couple of the large venture capital investment firms as a senior partner. And he finally created his own company, Synapse Partners, where he works with a lot of big enterprises and, of course, invests in a lot of startups. So no one like Evangelos to give us his view, both as a practitioner and investor, and someone who kind of understands the field back from its origins, I would say. So welcome, Evangelos. Great to have you here.
Usama, it's a great pleasure, always a great pleasure to talk with you in particular, but thank you for inviting me.
So let me start with the first question. With your long history with AI, from academia to industry to venture investment to kind of strategically leverage for enterprises, I would ask, why is AI such a big priority for enterprises? Why, and do they really realize the critical role of data in making AI work?
So I would say that we cannot yet paint with a very broad brush. We are working with several different enterprises from different industries, and in some cases, we need to educate boards of directors and senior management teams of what AI is. I was surprised that in some cases they believe that AI is only 5 years old, as opposed to having a multi-decade history. But again, for those who are starting to either re-engage with AI or start their AI journey, there are several reasons. Sometimes it is productivity, increasing productivity. Sometimes it is finding other type of efficiencies in their organization. And a lot of times it's about creating new products. So in several instances these days, our firm is involved in defining strategies of intelligent applications, so a series of different applications that are intelligent. We do that for companies in the new mobility space. We're also doing it for certain companies that want to leverage AI for various aspects of customer support, either to increase customer satisfaction or reduce reliance on human agents But again, it's so sometimes it's efficiency, sometimes it's productivity, sometimes it's new products that are driving this quest.
And kind of this understanding or lack of understanding of the importance of data in having the right data and making AI work. Do you think that's well understood, or is that still lost in the discussion?
Well, I actually will put it a little differently. Unfortunately, what we are finding, and I will say unfortunately in a very personal way, they believe that all we need is data, as opposed to some combination of data and other aspects that come to play with AI in order to create, in other words, a successful AI system. But there's definitely an increasing importance that the data they have been collecting could play an important role. There's also sometimes the realization that even though they have been collecting a lot of data, that data is not particularly useful to them. So that's trying to show them that they need to change their mindset it takes some effort.
Okay, let me move to another side of it here. You looked at a lot of work for leveraging, and as we move into mobility, let me start with something that's present in all our lives and talked about a lot: autonomous navigation. You've looked at a lot of work leveraging AI and autonomous navigation. What's going on, kind of right and wrong in that world, and where do you think the interesting problems will be?
Yeah. So as you said, the firm has been working on autonomous mobility and the use of AI in new mobility for actually since our inception. And personally, I have become very involved in this area since roughly 2014, a little earlier than that. I think that there's a great fallacy in believing that we will have an autonomous vehicle that will serve all of our use cases. And unfortunately, because of what has been written in the press over the past few years, there's a lot of misconception about that. We will need to start aligning autonomous vehicles and the capabilities of autonomous vehicles with specific use cases and specific operating design domains. So the robotaxi use case has certain characteristics. It operates in specific areas. The last mile delivery vehicle, which runs either on a sidewalk or just on a bike lane, has very different characteristics. So I think that there's going to be a lot of specialization around that, and we will need to address different problems because these vehicles are dealing with different realities. But more broadly than that, and particularly in the areas that our firm is very interested in, once we have these vehicles on the road, and I believe we'll get to that technology sooner or later. I mean, I don't think we've already made tremendous progress in that area, but I believe that more fundamental problems such as fleet operations, fleet management, monetization of autonomous mobility, mobility in a changing world. I mean, just in the last couple of years with the pandemic, our entire mobility patterns have changed. I mean, we have one of our recent investments, a company called Stipple, that is, its customers are increasingly asking it to compare through its software the 2019 mobility to 2021 mobility, and this is it's revealing some very interesting insights in terms of what people move towards, what modalities they use, how the intents of their trips change. So I think that these are important problems, and that's why we're funding them.
Yeah, and I think an example of the dichotomy in its understandings, like, I happen to be a believer that fast-moving vehicles on surface streets is a problem that's far from having a solution, but slow-moving vehicles that are able to stop and wait when they run into trouble, especially for the last mile, is probably a very pragmatic and doable goal. Let me ask you, I mean, you've written a couple of books, the Big Data Opportunity in Our Driverless Future and the Transportation Transformation in this area. And my question to you would be, what are the main themes emerging out of kind of these books, especially from an AI and data perspective?
Yeah. So actually, the first book that I wrote, I tried to reflect of why I got into mobility, which is I saw it as a big data and AI application, right? It's not because I'm a car person. I mean, I love certain type of cars like many other people do, but I came into mobility, and remember, I talk about mobility as opposed to transportation, right? To me, mobility is the ability to go from place to place as opposed to using a particular modality. But I wrote the first book with the thesis that data and AI will become key ingredients, not simple ingredients, but key ingredients to new mobility, and corporations that want to participate in new mobility, they need to take very serious look and educate themselves and become develop the right IP. The second book is about urban mobility and how where intelligence is manifested in the ingredients of new mobility, in the ingredients which are the digital platforms that we will be using, the infrastructure that we will be using, physical and virtual, the vehicles now which are autonomous, connected, electrified, and finally the overall environment and services that will be part, and the business models that will allow us to monetize that. And in each one of these four ingredients, there is intelligence, different kind of intelligence, different kind of data. But one of the main thesis of the second book was exactly to expose that and put it in the context of what automakers, mobility services companies, and cities will have to do in order to take full advantage of it.
Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit, you've been involved in launching some of the early analytic tools. I still remember the IBM days when you were running their whole data mining products and kind of launched some of the interesting commercials even in the area, as well as kind of with your own startup, Customer Analytics. I wonder, can you share some lessons or vignettes or, weird stories that you got exposed to, through these experiences, launching early tools for data mining and AI?
Yeah, this is these are lessons that I both carry in my investment career and try to impart even to the entrepreneurs that we fund. And this is, in addition to paying attention to the team that you assemble and to the overall market opportunity, it is important to understand the market pace, the market consumption pace, right? In other words, the pace with which the market it is able to consume the technology, the products that you are developing, the solutions that you are developing. And this is something that I have to say that particularly at IBM, and I came to IBM from another startup, but particularly IBM we had a problem appreciating, right? Because IBM had been such a technology leader, particularly in the corporations that it is serving, that we were generating, I would say, state-of-the-art technology, while we did not initially, at least, understand what the market was really ready for. And it was only after we started switching and, in a sense, dumbing down, if I can call it, the product, and being able to address more seriously some of the prerequisites to having that product, that we became extremely successful. I think the same thing happened. I would say this: the same thing happened with customer analytics. When we thought that with the internet emerging in such an aggressive way, the corporations that we were serving, particularly in the retail and financial services industry, would be readier to accept an intelligent system that for customer understanding, what is now called a customer data platform. But again, we had to make several adjustments to bring it back compared to the vision that we had laid out early on.
Yeah, and it's really funny. I mean, until this day, with Open Insights and even with the Institute for Experiential AI, as we talk to enterprises, I am always amazed at the lack of understanding of how much data you actually do need and at what level. People think that data collected for human consumption in business intelligence is useful to an algorithm, and as we both know, you need it at a whole other level of granularity and detail and volume for it to be useful in machine learning and things like that.
And this is, again, when we talk about having the data, but making the data consumable is something that eludes most corporations, right? Everything, I mean, even if you have determined that machine learning is the best way to move forward, regardless of what type of machine learning you use, the idea of preparing the data, labeling it, creating the right, I mean, all of this that goes into what is now called data engineering is something that we have to educate the corporations about.
Fully agree. As a partner, in a couple of VC firms, and now kind of running your own, I would say, I mean, you got the chance to observe so many companies from that perspective as a potential incoming investor or someone evaluating the competitive landscape and so forth. What themes stood out for you from those observations? I don't know if they can be summarized.
Well, so again, I'll make, first of all, the Synapse partners invest exclusively in early stage startups that develop enterprise software AI applications. So as I say to prospective portfolio companies, if you're not targeting the enterprise, if your solution is not software only, and if your main IP is not AI, we're not not a good investor for you. Right, so look for other good investors to finance your company. The second point is that in the investments that we make, and this is something that I've been carrying since 1982 when I got into AI, is that I view AI as an engineering endeavor, not as a cognitive endeavor. Right, so I make no statements about whether anything of what we invest in or anything that I have built in the past has any cognitive implications. So we're looking at it strictly from an engineering perspective. Now, I would say from a good news is that we're seeing applications in many different domains. So I'll give you a quick example. We recently, earlier in the year, we funded a German company called Awake Mobility that is developing a predictive diagnosis and overall operational efficiency solution for public transportation bus fleets. And in Europe, as you know, public transportation is a lot more embraced than here in the US. So even in these early days, they're having great success in being able to collect the right data and analyze it. And in the process, and this is why I said not about predictive diagnosis, but operational efficiency, is because they're finding that the data that they're collecting is not only appropriate, is not only giving visibility on what type of breakdowns a bus may have, but for the first time, from what its customers are telling us, this data can be used to better understand how to create efficient processes within their maintenance depots, right? So it has a much bigger implications. The bad news, I would say, is that we're finding too many companies that want to fit everything into statistical learning, statistical AI. And I think that as a result of that, they're not really looking problems as broadly as they could. I mean, it's okay to start with a narrow part of the problem, but you better have a good understanding of how your solution can expand over time, because that allows you to capture a bigger part of the available market. And again, in the case of Awake Mobility, we spend quite a bit of time helping them kind of like expand their view and determine that the same data that they collect, the same type of infrastructure they build can be used in more than predictive diagnosis.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, AI is a practice of engineering, and the cognitive aspects of it haven't advanced much in the last several decades, in fact, to give us insights as to how humans work. So, or human intelligence works. How, just generically, how should a large enterprise, and you work with many of them in an advisory capacity and helping them innovate and so forth, how should they think about AI? Like, what's your biggest advice for somebody like a large company?
So first of all, I would say that there's no question there's low-hanging fruit. So starting should not be a problem in this day and age, right? Because there is data, there are enough problems, there is already enough automation, there is already enough connectivity, there's enough computing, store. I mean, there are a lot of the barriers that you and I were facing when we were starting in AI certainly do not exist today. Okay. However, what I think is absolutely necessary is there needs to be a strategy that connects as opposed to looking at every application in isolation. There needs to be a strategy that allows a corporation to link things together and connect the financial returns with the overall deployment timeline, and obviously where the technology will play a role. Unfortunately, we're not finding, a lot of times we go in and we have to undo some of the thinking, some of the work that had to be done, because that sequence, and to me, it's a particular sequence, is not a set, kind of like an arbitrary set. I say, okay, well, I'll look at technology first, and then I'll look at the financial implications. No, to us is a sequence that you have to do this in a methodological way. And the other point, the second point I'm going to, second and last point I will make is that the work doesn't start and stop with data science. So I'll give you, we've invested in two startups, actually a couple of years ago. We invested in a company called Datatron, which is working with developing a system of what is now starting to be called MLOps, which is what happens after the data scientist finishes his or her work, right? And how do you deploy that and make it robust and make it explainable and make sure that the model is consistent across everywhere you use it, right? And that there's no version drift or every of the other problems that we have in traditional software now reflected in AI software, and particularly in the AI models. The second company is a company called Icasi, which uses AI to automate many of the tasks that are performed by data engineers and data scientists. And we believe that that is appropriate for small and medium-sized enterprises that do not have the ability to bring together a critical mass of a team, right, with data scientists and data engineers. We think that these guys will need something to help them automate that process.
And even in large enterprises, they often don't have the talent, and they don't have those dedicated teams that know how to do it. So that kind of technology certainly helps.
Yeah, I'm just saying that.
I would also emphasize what you said. Having that business case is so essential to the sustainability of any AI project. And it's really tragic when you see kind of that business case, failing to come together and be there in place. I want to. I'd like to wrap up with a general question. Given all your wisdom and exposure to this field and all of this, what are kind of parting words of wisdom you share with companies, with heads of companies, or even with people thinking about doing startups in AI? What would be the advice from you to them?
Look, I'll tell you exactly the same thing that I say to the startups that we invest in, which is, while a lot of things have changed between the previous AI spring and the AI spring that we're currently going through, there are many important lessons that can be applied, particularly when it comes to moving from prototype to deployed solution. In the previous AI spring, the brittleness of the systems, the lack of financial returns that they were promised, all of them turn out to be the major reasons for the momentum that we had back in the early 80s coming crashing down. And I believe that there is absolute need for whether it is practitioners at the corporate level or entrepreneurs at the startup level to understand how to make their systems real and learn from those previous failures. But to me, that's the best summary that I can give and I can impart to the users of AI today.
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we should have learned a lot from the first two AI winters. And like I say in a lot of my public talks, I am just blown away by how much hype continues to be put in place and kind of how people resist the temptation to correct that hype. And therefore, I always warn people, watch out. The winter is coming. So with those, and hopefully we will survive the third AI winter, which definitely will come and hit our lives. With those words, Evangelos, I would like to thank you very much for participating and look forward to continuing to work with you in the future on many interesting AI projects.
Thank you very much, Usama. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Legends of Data and AI. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of data and AI. If you're keen to learn more about making data and AI work in the real world and in any organization, join us next episode and subscribe to the podcast. As always, you can head over to open-insights.com to sign up for our email list, learn more about the work we do, and have access to data resources. See you on the next podcast.